Welcome to the Spirits Operator podcast. I'm your host, Mary B. Here, we navigate the ethereal currents between the mystical and the mundane. Join us as we embark on a journey to unravel the mysteries of healing, metaphysics, and the extraordinary, guiding you through a realm where spirituality meets everyday life. Get ready to explore the unseen forces that shape our world and discover how to harness their power for personal growth and transformation. Welcome aboard, fellow travelers, as we embark on this captivating adventure together. Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Spirits Operator podcast, where we embark on a quest to infuse the supernatural into our everyday lives. I'm Mary B., your host and professional psychic medium and intuitive development coach out of Navarre, Florida.
I'm Mary, and I'm Nicole, your guest host for today's episode. I'm so excited to be here, Mary, to do this with you today. I'm actually here to introduce Mary and the Spirits Operator podcast to the listening community. Before we dive into the mysteries that await us on the Spirits Operator podcast, can you tell us a little bit about how your experiences with the supernatural shaped your upbringing?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a very rural town in New Mexico, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of be outside a lot and be by myself most of the time. But in reality, I wasn't alone at all. As we know, we're never alone.
Right.
But I had a lot of experiences with nature spirits, such as like fairies and things like that, as well as my own personal guides and including ghosts and things that travel along that space. And that was pretty normal to me, honestly.
That's definitely not how I grew up.
Yeah, it was a bit different. I didn't have a religious upbringing, and so I didn't really have anything to put me into a place or make me kind of get that idea or whatever idea was already out there. I just navigated myself, and I think that that's how I was able to kind of be free, in my own way to explore my own belief system.
Interesting. And so how did growing up in a small town in New Mexico influence your connection to the supernatural?
Well, if any of you have been to New Mexico or even to the Southwest, you'll find that there's a lot of extreme culture there. And it's a very magical type culture. And when you immerse yourself into this Native American culture of I would say more spiritual than religious, you tend to be that, you're open to that. And because I didn't have a religious background and the spirits that were all around me in that area were from that area, were Native American, and just felt that experience was really, it shaped me a lot because it was open. I felt more open than I would say if I was raised in maybe where we live now in the Bible Belt, where there is, not to say that you don't find your path. That doesn't mean that you can't find your path within your own spirituality. But for me, I felt that was essential in my development process as far as being open.
And so did you maintain this openness throughout your entire life? I mean, how did that unfold for you, Mary?
So I would say, growing up, when I would tell people about my experiences and things, as far as kids go, kids are pretty open. So early on in my life, I didn't notice a real issue with it. I would explain that I see ghosts and I see these things, and people would go, wow, where, and it was people, as in kids, would say, wow, that's cool. Let's go check it out. And so I was still quite open through that time frame. And as I grew older, I would share with people and they would be like, they would balk at what I had to say, and my response, and I'm going to say through my entire life, I would say, well, you just don't experience it. I never said to myself, I think you're crazy. I never said I felt crazy at all. I knew what I saw was real. I knew
Right.
what I was experiencing was real. And I think that that's where, this power of oneself comes in. Even though I stopped sharing as I got older, into my teenage years, I kind of quieted down and was very selective over like who I shared with, just because I didn't want to be the weird one, but I was fully weird. Like, as I continue to be now, I embrace that weirdness, but it was quieted down a lot more. And I even asked to
I
have
can
it.
relate to that.
Yeah, I bet you can. No, we quiet that down for self-preservation or trying to fit in, and that's exactly what I did. I tried to fit in. So, it's always hard to grow up, isn't it?
It is. Peer pressure is a real thing, and especially in your teenage years. So you quieted it down. Did you, how did that look for you? A quieted down version of your abilities.
So it was, anything that was loud was very, I would say loud as in, when spirit speaks, oftentimes they speak in very quiet ways. You'll get little breadcrumbs from your guides and things like that to bring you along through life. But
Yeah.
I was in a place where I was ignoring all of that. And the subtle things got shoved to the side, but the really loud stuff would come through, like, don't get in that car, don't go down that street, that kind of thing. And
Yes.
as a
Yes.
teenager,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
yeah,
You're bringing back memories for me as well on that.
I bet. It's anybody that has this very strong intuitive nature will know what I'm talking about. And even if you don't, even if you're not, you don't claim to be intuitive yourself, we have these abilities inside of us that we can foster and create, get bigger. But there are going to be times when people, experience the loudness and they hear, don't get in that car, don't go down that path. And that is spirit talking to you, trying to help you out. That's the loud version. And I call that God speak because that's so loud that it's deafening almost. And you
Absolutely.
better listen to it, So,
Our guides
I
have to keep us on our path.
exactly. I mean, I quieted this down. And so that the little stuff went to the side, but the big stuff stuck out and I know got me through some seriously sketchy situations, and the other part is, I would have a lot of dreams and things like that of interactions with people. And, so dating the psychic girl, which they didn't really know that, but whenever I would say like, I saw you at some person's house last night, the boyfriend that wasn't being faithful. And I was dreaming about it. I was actually having dreams about that situation and then going to them and saying confidently that I knew that was what was happening. And they were like, well, how did you know that? And I would just be like, well, don't test me. I wouldn't tell them why or how. Right. But it absolutely was real. So again, I knew that those things that I was getting were always on point as far as they were real, and I trusted that. So, and that's been something that I've tried to do my entire life.
That makes perfect sense, Mary. So tell me, like, how did suppressing this gift, like, how did suppressing this connection to magic impact your sense of identity and belonging?
So, as I didn't really have the religious background to lean on, and I was looking for my connection to God, and I as a teenager, I went to church with friends. And even as a young kid, I tried exploring going to church and things like that. And while I find that it is a good stepping stone for people, it may not have been the path for me. And at some point, I started losing myself within this by suppressing it. And I started feeling lost, and my connection to spirit felt distant. And so I started seeking that out. in a church environment, but I would go and I would so much enjoy the music because I could feel spirit at that moment coming in with the music because the people were the happiest when they were singing. And I could feel that energy within that space. And so I loved that part of church. And then when I got into, the situation with preachers and things like that, it just didn't resonate entirely with me. Like there were things that did and things that didn't. And I just felt like, well, I already know these things. I've already connected to this kind of stuff within my own experiences. So I'm really looking for community. I'm looking for belonging. And I just didn't feel like I could find that,
Right. Yeah. It's nice though that you were able to at least get something out of, the religious experience, because there are nice parts of it, for sure. It's just, you got to find what resonates with you for your life.
Yes, absolutely. Like I always tell people, take what you like and leave the rest,
Exactly. So, Mary, can you share some of your experiences when you did finally, obviously you opened back up because,
yes.
Here you are today. Can you share some of your experiences with that, with your listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, through time, I've been, thankfully, I do have someone in my life that is very similar to me, or kind of a path maker. And that would be my older sister. So, when I started getting older and I had kids and things like that, started noticing more ghosts and things around the house and energies that I wasn't sure how to handle. And so I would contact her and things like that to help me through that. And that was kind of the baby steps into learning how to, put up boundaries energetically. And so really, I was just trying to put up walls. Like I was trying to put the Great Wall of China up. Let's just go with that. And so I was literally trying to block everything, every single thing out. And, for a long time, I felt like I did pretty good at that, and.
And Mary, can you tell us, like, how old were you at this point when you're?
So I was in my early 20s when, okay, when we were experiencing, because my kids, kids are very open. So all this stuff is going to be open to them too. And when these energies started coming into the space, because, I know that I'm a little beacon of light and I'm sure they are too. And when all these energies started coming into the space, I didn't know how to handle it. So I did reach out to my sister who has had more experience. She's older than I am. And she's been down this path a little bit longer. And I was able to say, well, what did you do during this? How do you take care of this space? How do you get these things out of here? How do you, So, fortunately I had that person that went through some of this. And so I blocked all that off.
What a blessing that is.
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of people don't. And this is part of why we're doing the podcast too, is to help people feel, close to someone that's already been through some of this stuff. And so they can gain some knowledge here.
Right. I mean, that was me. I didn't have anyone. I was just living my life thinking, well, this is just the norm,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, as I built this Great Wall of China to block off everything, I stopped listening. I really stopped listening to everything. And I was really, going through some stuff in the life, just as we do. We have experiences that are hard, and different levels of the roller coaster between, happy and sad and navigating that. But as time went on, I got to this point where I really wasn't listening to anything. And I was definitely in more of a 3-dimensional space, and it was heavier, it was very heavy. And
what do you you were in this 3-dimensional space and it was heavy for people who don't understand.
Yeah, of course. So, more human. I was living in more of an animalistic kind of way, where material things and the success based around those was more important than my soul's journey and purpose. And that I focus directly on that. And that's why I say heavy, because when we're in the animal sense, we're kind of living in fight or flight most of the time. And we tend to live in anxiety and in stress in that place.
Okay.
And
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I lived like that for a long time, and I knew that was uncomfortable. But I didn't listen to the cues of my little breadcrumbs, nor, anything else at that point, and based my success off of, my surroundings of the tangible physical stuff. So now let's fast forward into 2018. We moved into a new house, here in the Florida area, and I hurt my back really, really bad. And, turns out that I have degenerative disc disease. And what that means is that the disc isn't very strong. And I have like a back of a 80-year-old,
Oh,
and
goodness.
right. So any compression or pressure can cause the disc to push out and slip out. And when that happens, it hits the spinal cord and causes massive pain shooting down your leg. So you can end up with, sciatic pain. But on extreme cases, which is where I was at, it can cause you to not walk and not to be able to hold your bowel system or anything like that. So
that's a lot to deal with.
It is. It was a lot of pain, and I handle pain pretty well. So I knew that something wasn't right. Like, truthfully, something was really wrong. And, I had to go in. I went in for an MRI. They said, "Oh my goodness, you need surgery." So I said, "Okay, we're going to do this." And they said, "Oh yeah, this is a outpatient surgery. You'll be out of here in the next day," and this and that. And I was like, So here comes the spirit, coming in. I said, "I don't think so." I even told my boss, who is a local company here. I said, "I need you to hire somebody in my place, because I don't want you to be left without someone, because I know that I'm not coming back right away." And he's like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Oh, I'm sure. 100%. And he's like,
That
"Okay."
intuition.
Yeah. I mean, here we were, being yelled at. So I'm like, no, I'm not coming back right away. And so even to the point where we packed stuff for me. So I go in August of 2018 for my surgery, and I wake up and I am unable to walk.
Oh goodness. Yeah. That sounds scary.
It was extremely scary. I mean, I didn't know that specifically was what was going to happen. Went through a lot there, and I knew that I needed to stop. Like, I was being stopped in my tracks, and I couldn't quite understand it at that point. I was going through all the emotions of not ever being able to walk again, possibly, not being able to go to the beach, not being able to do all the things that I had wanted to do in my life. And I was struggling with all of that. And I remember I was by myself, and I was sitting there waiting for the nurse to come in and help me up, to the bathroom and things like that. And I just started crying, and I felt so alone and so awful. And then, my grandfather, who is in spirit, who passed when I was 17, he comes in, and I'm like, "What?" Where, I literally said, "Where have you been?"
How funny.
Yeah. I said, "Where have you been?" And he says, I'm here all the time, but I came today to see you because I wanted you to know that you're never alone, and everything is going to be okay. Aww. So I get emotional with this because it's, yeah.
What a beautiful message.
Yes. So this point in time, someone who was so strong in my life, such an influence in my life, came through to me at my darkest hour, and so his appearance, his presence, saying everything was going to be okay. I believed him. I 100% believed him, oh yeah. And so, as you see, I'm a crier, right? So any emotion that I have, I'm a water person. I'm a Cancer. So I'm like, I feel everything, right? So anyhow, so he comes in, all of this happens, and I'm like, wow, I feel this power inside. I feel this new renewed strength that I'm going to be okay. Everything's going to turn out just fine. And, it's going to take time, right? But I'm going to be strong, and I'm going to work through this. So every night around 7:00, my husband would leave, the hospital, and that, to go home and take care of the kids. I was left by myself, or supposedly by myself. And I would cry. I would just cry. And then all of a sudden I felt this wave, and this was going on for night after night after night, this wave of love. And I could feel the prayers from people just laying over my body, over my legs. I could feel it. And
wow,
it was like a blanket. Yeah. It was so beautiful. It was like a blanket of love just covering me, and I could feel that calming energy over me. And then I could see spirit doctors. Like I could see them in my mind's eye coming in and helping me and helping heal my back. And I could feel, spirit nurses and things like that coming in. And it was just like everything changed. And I realized that, in the morning I wake up and I was ready to go. I was ready to get out of there. I was ready to go through that physical therapy. And I was noticing the energy of other people. I could feel it again. I was open. I was cracked open, and it was time. And so I decided that instead of, living in that heavier space where other people were, because they were all going through some terrible stuff too in this therapy place, I would encourage them. And so I sat around and I would talk to them, tell them they were doing a great job. And, and that encouraged me to do a better job. So,
oh, well, how neat.
Yeah.
Isn't that
spent
funny
a good,
how that works?
It sure is. It sure is. You spread the light. And it brings you comfort too. So I go through all this, and then it's like at the end of December 2019, I'm actually able to get around. I'm able to walk again, not as well. I worked really, really hard on physical therapy and everything to get strong again. And I just decided that I was going to change my path, and I was going to be open to myself again, that I found myself finally, through all that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Wow. You've made me a little bit emotional listening to your story as well. I just find it so cool how, again and again, spirit keeps you on your path.
Yes.
We come here with a plan, and if we don't stick with the plan, they have perfect, rights to
Stop you.
kick our little stop us, or kick our little booties to the curb and give us a stern talking to.
Exactly. And people ask me, would you have gone through that surgery again? I'm like, well, for one, I probably wouldn't be walking if I hadn't done the surgery. And two, oh my gosh, what a blessing through that pain, through that misery. I've uncovered myself, so yeah. I'd do it again quickly.
So Mary, now that we know a good bit about your experiences, which are amazing, maybe we should tell the listeners how you and I met and how we know each other. Do you want to get started with that?
Sure. Yeah. So, as you knew a little bit earlier here, we talked about, in 2019, at the end of 2019, I started really diving into the mediumship and connecting to that, because I knew that was a huge part of my purpose. And, I started listening to books and connecting to, people who had influenced me in the past. And so listening like John Edward and some of his books helped guide me a lot in my mediumship. And but then I got to a point where I felt like I needed a little bit more hands-on guidance. And I was listening to this podcast called Enlightened Empaths,
I
Samantha
know
and
it.
Denise. Do you?
Familiar.
Weird, right? This is how we connect. So I was listening to this podcast, and Samantha and Denise that host the podcast were offering a mediumship course. And I thought, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to jump into that. And so that's, now you can tell your part of the story.
So I'm curious because how you felt about learning that you could take a class. I was shocked the first time I heard that. It was on that
Yes.
podcast as well. And I was like, what? You can take a
Yes.
class?
Right?
Yeah, I went and told my husband, I was so excited. I was like, I was so timid about my abilities back then. And I knew, I was confident with certain parts of it, but I was very timid as as my friend who's helped me through this. I was like, I feel like I have, some abilities and I'd like to kind of see and take a class. And he was very encouraging. It's these guys that ended up with us. They're just
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
I give them
Top
kudos.
notch guys, for sure.
Yeah, top notch and my husband is very encouraging and he's like, do it, babe. And so I signed up for the class, you signed up for the class, and we ended up in the same class. And you and I never ended up being matched up as partners because that's how the class works. Like you match, classmates up together. It was a fairly large class.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up on one of the classes, which was over Zoom, there was a chat box on the side, and I mentioned New Orleans, which normally I wouldn't have even participated in that. I was sat back like just listening, but spirit prompted me to say something about New Orleans in the chat, and you jumped on that and said, hey, I think we don't live that far from each other. And then there was another one of our classmates that said, I live near there too. She's in Baton Rouge area. So we decided to meet up all three of us met up in New Orleans to meet in person, and the rest is history.
Oh, that was such a fun day. Oh my gosh. We really had a great time in that very spirit filled area.
For sure.
Well, I'm so grateful for how we've been led to each other, and I know that we've grown from each other's experiences, and I'm really, really glad to be here with you on this new journey. So pretty cool.
Same here, Mary. Very, very grateful for you as a friend and as a mentor in my mediumship journey as well.
Thanks.
So, Mary, can you tell the listeners about the overarching theme of the Spirits Operator podcast, and why is this your current passion?
Yeah. So, well, as you know, we are spirit led. It's been, gosh, I've had this thought for many, many years actually now, and wanting to develop a podcast, but it just didn't feel like the timing was right, or maybe I just wasn't where I needed to be. And it is very, very strong on my heart right now. And so I'm listening, as we do, as our intuition is kicking in. This is important. And I want to, my goal here with the Spirits Operator podcast is to foster a sense of community, where everyone feels connected and supported, knowing that they're not navigating this path alone, yet as like how you said, you grew up, where it was just you, and I fortunately had somebody that had already paved that, but they didn't pave it for her. So we've got some ways that we can pave this. And over time, I've come to recognize that individuals have encountered unusual phenomenon, in their life. Yet they hesitate to speak to anyone about their experiences. And I want to change
Exactly.
that, Yeah. Yeah. So I want to normalize that. I want to normalize the supernatural experience, by interviewing various types of people who have found ways to let the magic in and share their own personal magic. So
I love that. I feel that's going to be helpful for many people who are listening. And so what are some of the themes and the topics that you're going to be discussing in some of the more recent future episodes, Mary?
So this first series that I'm creating is called The Many Waves of Healing, which will include hypnosis, general healing techniques, and a mix of traditional healing with an intuitive twist. So that's the first series, The Many Waves of Healing. And so which listeners just keep in tune because Nicole's going to be on our second episode of that series. So very exciting. She's going to tell us more about her and her path. And then in future, very exciting, isn't it? So in our future series, we will discuss psychic abilities, mediumship, the empath. We'll go into some ghost encounters, some spooky stories, in the history of magic and how it kind of has influenced everything through time. So just get ready.
Ooh, I can't wait. It sounds fun.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's going to be interesting. And Mary, I just have one little tidbit before we close out for the show. I remember being in meditation 4 years ago, possibly 5 years ago, and coming out, it was a deep meditation. I came out of the meditation and I immediately texted you and I said, Spirit told me we're going to be working together in the future.
Yes.
On some kind of project. And I pictured us on like a video screen like this. And
I love it. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And so here we are. And it's so exciting. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what, all the ways that your podcast unfolds. And I know that your listeners are going to enjoy every bit of it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being here and being my guest and interviewer today.
You're so welcome. It was a pleasure.
Well, take care, everybody. Until next time.
Bye.